I think what's also sort of important that now we're seeing AI emerging as a powerful threat, right? So that's the other side of the coin. I'm going to talk about both sides of the coin because I think it is important to have balance here. And in the next couple of slides, I'm going to talk a little bit about the aspects of the AI threat landscape, both operational risk as well as attacks and defense. But when we talk about AI threats, again, it's important to understand that AI being used operationally by adversaries, but it's also, I think, how we see attackers are actually attacking AI as well. So that's what I mean about the AI challenge is it's multidimensional, and I kind of want to bring some of that out in the talk today. So again, a little bit more on stats. I think this is interesting. There's a couple of statistics here, and the comment I like to make about this is as soon as one of these statistics sort of slides emerges, they're almost immediately out of date within a week, and sometimes even within a day, right? This one in particular, you'll see employee shadow AI use. 55% of employees use public Gen AI almost weekly. I just saw a stat the other day that said it's 57% now, right? And I chuckle about that a little because, I did a talk recently and I was in a room and I asked people to raise their hands. I said, how many people, not for cyber or, how many people are just using generative AI in their day-to-day work? And pretty much every hand went up in a room of about 200 people. Almost everyone raised their hand about using some kind of generative AI. And when I talk about shadow AI, and I'll talk more about that in a minute, but this is the idea of employees using AI that's potentially not sanctioned, right? And that could come in the form of just someone using, and I hate to name names, but just using tools like Grammarly or using tools like photo manipulation tools, or just our friends at ChatGPT or Gemini, and just interacting with it on a casual basis, and even going so far as to developers and engineers deploying models that are out on the out in your environments, and so a lot of those models are unsanctioned. So shadow AI, like shadow IT, comes in many different flavors. We also talk about attacks on these AI apps, models, and data. Now, by using and leveraging unsanctioned or shadow AI, exposes you. 70% of enterprises will have operationalized AI architectures. And again, I saw a stat recently that said 85% of enterprises are going to expand their AI operations just in this next year, right? And a lot of them are going to use open source models. So what does that mean? That means they're going to go out and maybe not necessarily use a sanctioned model like ChatGPT that may or may not be sanctioned for your use. They may go out and download an open source model from tools like Hugging Face or some of these other areas, which, by the way, have compromised models. Yes, models can be compromised, and if they make their way into it's almost as if not more dangerous than a phishing email making its way into your inbox. Imagine having a model making its way onto your cloud infrastructure, and that model could be compromised in some way. So a little bit more technical about that in a minute. But so getting back to the expanded attack surface, right? We're talking about the explosion of Gen AI. And again, I mentioned it not only is it happening, for all of our employees and all of our engineers, it's also happening right down to our living rooms, right, personally, as well as out in our clouds. And I mentioned this, a quick example. I was doing an AI scan for a client not that long ago, and I was looking across their AWS environment, and I found over 2,000, I think it was like 2,400 instances of something called Amazon Poly, and which is, and if you're not familiar, Amazon Poly is sort of this cloud-based service that converts text into lifelike speech. It's capable of doing things like file transfers. It has some known vulnerabilities, but it's known to be used to do things like deepfakes and other types of technologies. Now, client had no idea they had over 2,000 instances of it running, and after an investigation, we revealed that it was just a configuration switch buried inside a build that they had. So every time they were building an image, Amazon Poly was the service was getting installed and going out with that instance. So they had over 2,000 of them sort of running in the environment that they didn't know about, right? So just another example of how you could inadvertently be exposing yourself to risk, leveraging tools like this that you're just unaware of. Very important, very exciting space, but just, also I'll use a term a mentor of mine used to say, running with scissors, right? Is sort of this idea that comes to mind when we talk about the explosion of generative AI when it comes to our clouds. And again, just engineers, architects wanting to do good, wanting to accelerate, wanting to innovate, but potentially exposing the enterprise to risks that I believe we can mitigate. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But so just sort of summarize, right? Again, shadow AI, right? Unsanctioned AI, sort of the presence, of AI across your environment, but the absence of inventory and visibility is very, very dangerous. Risk associated with governance, right? Acceptable use policies, which lead to misconfiguration, over-reliance, and a whole host of other types of things that happen. For example, sensitive data oversharing, data poisoning, model theft. I mean, there's a whole number of things that happen with the expanded risk surface or attack surface that AI brings in. And then, of course, sort of this data exposure, right? Not having visibility into AI pipelines, unknowingly exposing potential confidential data. Data exposure leads to unauthorized data access, and that leads to cyber attackers getting to your data pools, and also, inadvertently poisoning information. So there's just lots of entry points here that we need to have visibility and awareness to.